Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the KOMO Town Hall, Your Voice, Your Future. We're talking about the crisis, the future of SPD, the police officer shortage crisis, some of the solutions on the table, and what we can expect as a community moving forward. I'm delighted to have our participants with us today. We have Casey McNerthney from the King County Prosecuting Office, Jim Fuda from Puget Sound Crime Stoppers. We have Professor Jacqueline Helfgott from Seattle, your criminal justice professor, joining us. We also have Victoria Beach. You can't see her, but I can assure you she is joining us all the way from Israel. Victoria is the African American Community Advisory Council for SPD. So thank you so much, everyone, for being with us today to discuss this very relevant crisis that we're facing all across the country, really. Seattle is just one of many major cities dealing with this officer shortage crisis. Thanks so much for being with us today. And I'd just like to talk about where we, and by we, I mean all of our panelists here, where you believe some of the biggest issues lie with this particular crisis. Jim, can we start with you?
Yeah, I'm thinking that obviously it's crimes, what's happening to the mainstream. Things are not getting investigated because of the shortage, and people are having to wait for their services, and some are being just directed to a website, so that familiarity of the policeman in the neighborhood seems to have gone a bit by the wayside, and obviously most of us would like to see that back. You know, when I was a cop in the early 70s, things have changed. You know, I hired on when a cop had a problem, it was okay, come on boys, we're going to take him out and we're going to go drinking, that kind of thing. That culture changed. More of the workout crowd, more conscientious cops, and then now we're in another culture again that things need to change, and we need to get a different breed of officer and attract that reflects our community values.
Victoria, I'd like to go to you now from a community standpoint, from a community needs standpoint. What, if anything, has changed?
Oh, everything has changed. There just aren't enough officers to respond to 911 calls, you know, and when you dial 911, you're calling because it's an emergency. And I'm not faulting the police, but they take forever to get there or they don't show up. We need them. Our city is in big trouble. And yeah, it's like even myself, and I've talked to other people, now when I hear gunfire, if it's not more than, if it's one shot, I won't call. If it's several, I will call, but it's, we don't have, I feel like we don't have a police department, and it's scary. You know, I hear from so many people in the African American community, and they want the police. You know, other people try to speak for us. We want them. Here, one reason why I'm here in Israel, I'm with several other African American leaders, and we have been talking about it. There's some from New York, Alabama, Chicago, and we're all saying the same thing. Our departments are hurting, but I don't think they're hurting as bad as Seattle.
Victoria, thank you. Casey, I'd like to pass this to you now. Can you give us an example, or can you kind of break it down for us? What kind of an impact does an officer shortage have when it comes to a prosecutor's office standpoint? Because the city's criminal justice system is only as effective as its many parts, if all of those different parts are working together. So tell us what it's like from the prosecuting side of it, things.
There's really two aspects that are a big concern here. The first is that we need investigators to get us cases. You may get someone to respond to a 911 call, but that's only one part of it. The officer who responds to a 911 call, that initial report is not enough to charge a felony case, not only in Seattle or King County, but anywhere in the state of Washington. It has to go to an investigator who fills out what's called a certification for determination of probable cause. That's a long-winded way of saying the follow-up investigation document. As we've seen officers leave, there have been fewer detectives to do those documents. And as those investigators go to patrol to try to keep 911 times down, you may get a response, but the follow-up, there just aren't enough bodies there. And that's frustrating for everybody because there are, great officers who get us those cases and who are very dedicated. But the more we see those officers go away, the less referrals we see. And ultimately that affects victims. And that's the other part of it. This really affects people who are victimized by crime. And Victoria mentioned this too. You don't see that as much in Medina or Laurelhurst, even though those areas are certainly facing the effects of it too. But it's the areas where you most need a response, where you hear gunshots and you want to know that officers are not only there to respond, but also to do a follow-up investigation and refer that case to prosecutors. That's the real life effect that we're seeing of the police shortage.
Before I get to Professor Helfgott, I'd like to show you guys this graphic, and it's something that I think you are all very familiar with. It's SPD officers in service that go back from 2013 until 2022. And when you look at the chart, it's really staggering because you're talking about, we've had a total number of nearly 1,300, about 1,300 officers, more or less, in the 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and then all of a sudden drops to under 1,000 in 2021, 2022. The question that I have for you, Professor Helfgott, is it's one thing to increase the budget and to give police officers raises to try and recruit more, but what happens when people aren't applying? What happens when these recruitment campaigns aren't working, and so it's harder to fill these numbers?
Well, I do the annual Seattle Public Safety Survey, and I'm involved in community police dialogues every week. So what I'm, and I can say that since we've started doing that survey in 2015, lack of police capacity has been one of the top two issues every year. The last 2 years, it was the number one issue. So way before on the graph that you saw, community members were talking about lack of police capacity, wanting to see more police in their neighborhoods. So, what I'm hearing from community members is just people are in a state of confusion. They're trying to respond to what they're seeing all around them on the news and different voices that they're hearing, people saying, talking about systemic racism and fears about, police violence on one hand, but then they're responding to, perceptions of increased, and actual increases in crime and violence, and they're not knowing what to do. Everything from not knowing whether to call police because they want to be supportive of police and they don't think there are enough police, or maybe they don't want to call police because they don't want to contribute to the systemic racism, but then they feel like they're just on their own. And so I think that Seattle is in a state of crisis in the sense that the community perception for many people is that people are just left on their own and they're not understanding what to do or how to respond, and there are not answers for people in terms of other alternatives given this lack of police capacity. And regarding your question of what can be done,
to hire more officers.
I think there need, and I know SPD is doing a lot to recruit officers, but every agency is doing a lot. This shortage is occurring in every agency across the country. So every agency is competing. And, we have a lot of, issues in Seattle with high costs of living. And so there's a lot that has to be ramped up to help recruit officers, for Seattle, given the cost of living and given all of the issues that we face.
And this is a question for everybody, how do you respond to that? Do you guys see this as a problem that necessarily will just eventually work itself out with time as the pendulum starts to swing in the other way and we kind of adapt and adjust? Or is this something that can be improved and quickly improved with policies and ideas from city leaders?
I think it's going to, like you just said, it's going to have to pan out. I think what it's going to take is more of the community to speak out and to say, we want SPD. We want them in our neighborhoods. They're not the loudest voice, and we have to be the loudest voice that we want them and we support them. But on the other hand, we're going to hold them accountable. I'm involved in Before the Badge program, and so far I think have hired 23 recruits, and that's not enough. But I think these recruits are going to change policing in Seattle. And that's what it's going to take also. Not only does the community have to do their part, but SPD also has to do their part in hiring the right officers and holding them accountable. So it's going to take time. And I think things are going to just be rough and not good for us.
I totally agree with Victoria on this. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You're describing growing pains, and that leads me to this next question, which is for both Jim and Casey. With your contacts and people actually in policing right now, people who have been in policing in the past, as far as adapting to this new way of policing, what kind of reception is this getting? Is this something that you feel like departments are willing to go in and grow in?
I think it's not a matter of going along with. They're going to have to, and I was at a roll call at the East Precinct last week, and one of the officers made the statement, which was actually heartwarming. She said, "I actually had somebody thank me on the street yesterday," and so just something minor like that, and her to make a statement like that, gives what some of the attitude and perception has been from the police side of things over the last few years. So it's a matter of coming back to the community. Years ago, Australia was the leader in community-oriented policing. And the FBI goes to them in the 80s and says, what are you doing that's so special with your people? And they took out a 1940s NYPD handbook. It says you get to know your people. You haven't done your job unless you've shaken 5 hands of business owners. You get out and meet and that way you build that trust and they talk to you.
Casey, what about you?
I think there's hope with what Mayor Bruce Harrell has been clear about, wanting to bring more officers. And I think that he does that well through transparency in saying, we're going to be transparent about this. And also, I think his message echoes kind of the opposite of what we're seeing on social media. It feels now in our culture, not limited to Seattle or King County, that you're either for police or against them, or you're for transparency and thoughtful police work, or you're against it, or you're on the other side. Where I actually think that you can be both. And it's been hopeful to see the mayor say that of course we support police and we support thoughtful, reasonable officers. I think transparency is going to be the key. And that's why at the prosecutor's office, any case that we have, we'll talk about the decision one way or the other. And also, it should be noted that it feels like there are different parts of the city. Amazon, for example, has a huge security force. And if you go to 6th and Lenora or 7th and Lenora, it feels very different than if you go to 3rd and Pine or an area where there isn't an Amazon building. Getting people who work on blocks that have private security to understand the realities of what other people are facing on blocks that aren't as fortunate to have that private security there can put a bigger focus on the impact. And if you go back to the Seattle room at the Seattle Public Library downtown or the Seattle Archives, what you'll find is that even if you go back to 1980, the year that I was born in Seattle, there were more officers on foot patrol in the city then, even with the explosion in population that we've had. And so I think the more people are curious and the more people see the transparent nature of what's happening, the better off we'll be collectively to solve this together.
You bring up a good point about visibility and presence, more officers. As far as a deterrent to crime, Professor Helfgott, is that something that still, to put it simply, does that still work in today's society?
Well, the research is mixed in terms of, the hotspot policing and preventative policing. But yes, the bulk of the research suggests that when areas are targeted by, when police are increased in an area, that can, diffuse or disperse crime out of that area. So. And the issue that Casey mentioned and Jim, and Victoria, are all the issue of changing the conception of police and who police are and what policing is about is, in ways that create hope for the future and help people understand the human connections. I mean, that's what I'm hearing a lot of community members talk about. They want to see police smile more, or they want to have opportunities to engage and interact, but with the lack of capacity over the last couple of years, it's decreased that ability to have that. I mean, there are no more community police teams, and a lot of the capacity that Seattle police had to do the community policing that's been around for a long time or to improve on it has gone by the wayside.
Right, and we hear about the crime, but it's not only crime itself, it's getting that fear of the crime out of there as well. That's a part of it. Just that presence, knowing that I feel safe, is a big part of this as well, because it may not seem as bad if you don't feel that you're going to be a victim in the next 30 minutes. And so I think that's a part of it too, with just the mere police presence.
Well, and I want to say something about that too, because that's the data we collect on the Seattle Public Safety Survey. And getting to what Casey said about the differences between neighborhoods, we measure quality of life in neighborhoods in the survey. So we're able to see what people's fear of crime are in different neighborhoods and people's views of the police and how tight people are with their neighbors and informal social control, the degree to which people get involved in their neighborhoods. And so all of that matters in terms of how people are experiencing and their perceptions of crime.
More than 400 officers have quit the department in the last couple of years. And by that, I mean January of 2020. Theoretically, say somehow the department could hire all of them back. Even in that kind of scenario, is this something that citizens would see the benefits of instantly right away? Just sheer numbers? Or are we held back because we can't find enough prosecutors? We still don't have enough detectives. We still don't have enough employees at the corrections office. We still don't have, in other words, is this just one small piece of an entire criminal justice system that we're focused on without looking at shortages happening elsewhere, and it's all connected?
I'll jump in on that one from the prosecutor's office. If we had 100 more cases referred to us or 500 more cases referred to us tomorrow, and they were serious, Class A felonies, we'd find a way to address those, and we wouldn't just put those in a drawer somewhere. But you're right, there are other parts too. I know that the King County jail staff is really struggling to find enough people and have raised questions previously about restrictions in overall bookings, which can be difficult because each case needs an individual look at the totality of the person and their history and why they were arrested. But you're right. If even if we had 400 more officers tomorrow, there still is that difficulty of the jail staff. And, the prosecutor's office could handle those cases, but it's not like we're swimming with in a huge budget pool like Scrooge McDuck with all the gold coins. It's always tight anytime that you've got a budget, particularly with taxpayer dollars. And so we could figure it out, but any kind of additional support is needed, I think, for each part of the system.
And the other side, this is going to be a long-term problem. If you hire a raw recruit, by the time they get hired to the time they're a viable one-person patrol unit, it's 18 months. So you look at hire 400. One, there's not enough field training officers out there to handle that. The academy can't can't handle that kind of load right now. So it's going to be a staged in a process. So you're looking at a 5 or 10 year problem.
That's kind of frightening when you think about it and put it that way, Jim. And to speak to these growing pains that Victoria had mentioned, this could be a years-long process then to get us back to where we were from a number standpoint just 5-6 years ago.
Absolutely.
Can you give us some more insight as far as, oh, did we lose someone?
I just had to read it.
Okay. Can you give us some more insight as far as what the community, if anything, what ordinary citizens can do to inspire, to be more hopeful, to be more proactive when it comes to public safety, the perception of police, modern day policing, how we can change attitudes, I guess?
Well, I like I said in my opening, is I feel that the police department has to reflect the makeup of the community, and that's a first start for trust, and then have these outreach teams that actually go out and meet with different ethnic groups. And help build that community support and trust within the department and its communities, the diverse communities that we serve.
You know, like I said earlier, I'm part of Before the Badge, and we have officers going out to the communities and talking with them and asking what they need. I mean, there is dialogue happening, but you know, the one thing that I really think is going to help, it's great that we have a mayor that supports the police and is willing to work with them. You need that. But city council, you know, they're the ones that are to blame for this, why we're in this situation. People have got to get out and vote. You know, we can't keep the ones that are there now that have caused this. I mean, they literally caused what we're going through, and we have to get rid of them. I think that's going to be a game changer.
Victoria, you mentioned Before the Badge, and I know, Jacqueline, you're familiar with this as well. And can you guys explain what this is, what's happening in our communities, and how this could help improve this crisis that we're in?
Well, it's the recruits go before they're hired 5 weeks earlier, and they go through a 5 weeks of training. They have a wellness training. They've hired a psychologist. They meet with every community that they're going to be working in, and like I said, the dialogue have been powerful. They talk about gentrification, racial profiling, all of it. I mean, it's pretty intense. I mean, and I'm hard on them. And I when they asked me to be a part of it, I said, you know, I am going to be hard on them, and I am, and because I want to make sure we're hiring the right officers and that they understand, especially how and why the Black community feels the way they do towards them, and they get it. And these officers, every single one of them have said, we want to join SPD because we want to be the change. And I believe it, and I see it in them.
Jacqueline?
Yeah, I'll add that to what Victoria said. So yeah, it's the 45-day training prior to basic law enforcement academy. In addition to everything Victoria said, they're also presented with panels of formerly incarcerated individuals. They do community. We do the community police dialogues every week where the community members can meet with the recruits, and I facilitate those, and the community members are offered the opportunity to talk to the recruits about what they want to see when the recruits hit the street, and then the recruits talk about what their backgrounds are. And like Victoria said, they're coming in with a lot of different backgrounds, very diverse group of recruits coming in, some who know many different languages, with just all kinds of backgrounds. And that's what they're saying. And some of them are saying that they watch on the TV what happened, the murder of George Floyd, and then everything that happened in Seattle with the protests, and they wanted to come be the change here. People who are not even from Seattle, and then many who are from Seattle who don't want to criticize. They want to come in and make change. And so watching what the community members have been engaged, the dialogues that they've been engaged in, and hearing what the community members' feedback is that the Before the Badge program and the recruits is giving people a lot of hope for the future. And the other thing I want to say about what you said, asked about how long it will take for the change to happen, even though, as Casey was mentioning, yes, every component of the criminal justice system is going to, have an impact in terms of moving, when someone's arrested and moving, people through the system. But police are a lot more than law enforcement. In fact, they're mostly, guardians to the community, they're service to the community, and they're part of the community. And people want to feel back to the, feeling safe. People want to see police in their community. They want to talk to them. They want to interact with them, have a coffee conversation with them, which, sometimes has come out of these dialogues. And then we haven't talked yet about the community service officers, that there's something like, I don't know, Victoria, if you know the exact number, over 20, I think, have been hired. And so the more police, or the more personnel hired by Seattle Police, will give that increase that capacity too, for the community service officers to be working in conjunction with the police. And we also haven't talked about the co-responder teams that Seattle Police has had since 2010, that just got increased to 5 prior to 2020. And those also need to be increased across all the precincts. And so there's a lot that can be done even without changes to other components of the criminal justice system.
Jacqueline, can you expand on that? What is that?
The co-responder teams. So the Seattle Police has had the crisis intervention, crisis response unit since 2010. They've had a Seattle police officer partnered with a social worker. Originally, and I think they still are contracting with DESC for the social workers. I think there's been some change administratively with all of that, but those co-responder teams have existed since 2010. My colleague Matt Hickman and I did the first evaluation of it in 2010, and the recommendation at that time was to increase, and it took them years to increase to 5. And if we had those co-responder teams, police and social worker, mental health professional working together, if that was increased so that SPD could have those co-responder teams in each precinct, which I know has been an interest for a long time, but that also got, somewhat derailed with the staffing issues. So there's all kinds of ways, the community service officers, the co-responder teams, and just having more police on the street, bringing back the community police teams, so that there are more, and then the police that are from the collaborative police unit. I mean, Victoria was mentioning the police that go out to all the community groups. We don't hear half, or most of what The collaborative police team is involved, and we have Kim Baguki, who's headed up the IF project, working with prisoners for many years. We have, Officer Matt Roberson, who's been working with youth for many years. Officer Lucas, Detective Cookie. These are people who are out in the community. They've been out in the community their entire careers, and we don't hear enough of what they are doing day in and day out. And that gets back to the importance of changing what people know about what is actually going on. Because if I can't even count how many people have come to our dialogues and have said, wow, I didn't know Seattle Police had co-responder teams since 2010 and a CIT unit since the late 90s. Wow, I didn't know about the community service officers, or I didn't know about the collaborative policing unit. And so people don't know, or I don't know how to change that, but people need to know.
The people who do know and are familiar with them, these people have rock star status. I mean, Officer Cookie, she was at Eric's Hero not too long ago. She has been a member of this community for decades, and people that live there know her and love her. I mean, she's famous, well known. She's a huge part of their community. And to what you said, Jim, and police, they're members of the community. They're not just officers, but really members of a community where they live. Can you describe, Jim and Casey, the morale, if you know, in the department, how it's been, and if it's changed at all since 2020?
Well, personally, like I said, I hadn't had a lot of contact except on certain calls or talking about different crimes where they want Crime Stoppers help in, where citizens can report crime anonymously. Some of them are feeling a little buried, but I think for the most part, and it was recent, it was just last week, I hit the precincts and Harbor and some of these other areas, and although some of them are a lot less staffed, I think there's a gleam that they're starting to feel that things are changing. I think they're feeling support from the mayor. Well, I think that's something they felt in the past that they did not have, and I think that's a key element. You can give them all the money, all that goes along with it, but if you're not valued and respected by what you're doing and you don't feel protected, I think you're going to have issues.
Casey, what about you?
I think people want to be heard for the people that they are. It's very easy to look at a police officer or a prosecutor or a defense attorney or a judge and say, oh, they're all like this. But I can tell you that the prosecutor's office in King County and Seattle Police is very different than officers in other parts of the country or prosecutors in other parts of the country. And I think the way that we get through this is personal relationships. It's not a coincidence that at the time, the biggest shift in personal relationships in our lifetime, where we didn't get to be around people, is when we saw the biggest change to SPD. The more we can have personal relationships to work with one another and to see people for who they are as individuals, the easier we will get through it. And it's not ever really going to be easy. But I do sometimes, in terms of the morale in the prosecutor's office, feel guilty for being the person who gets to speak on behalf of the hundreds of people in the prosecutor's office, because there are people who are working much harder than I am. People, in the criminal division, the family support, and the civil divisions, and the front office, who are doing the work that is really difficult and hard and long at all hours of the night. Every homicide scene, there is a senior deputy prosecutor who goes to each one of those in Seattle and King County and goes to the autopsy. And some of those are really traumatic for them to go see, but they're doing that work on behalf of people and the victims that they serve. Just this afternoon, there was a prolific graffiti tagger who was arrested by SPD last night. And to make sure that we had the most up-to-date, the clearest picture that we could present to a judge at the first appearance hearing, there were 4 different prosecutors who worked on that, and 2 different captains and sergeants and detectives at SPD. That work will probably, if I didn't mention it here, I'm not sure that anybody would ever know about that. But that work on behalf of victims and to make the city and county better is happening all the time. And I wish that people could see the work of what prosecutors in our office, and I'm sure SPD does as well, to see the human side of it, because it would be a much different perspective if people could.
I think there's this disconnect because it took 2 years. Things have happened in the last 2 years with the skyrocketing crime, with graffiti, with the homeless crisis, with the drug addiction crisis. People are at a point where they're desperate for solutions, and people are looking for a fast fix. And this is something that is just not possible. It's going to take some time. I do hear a message that all of you seem to be saying, which is you're all hopeful that the future things will get better. We will get back on track. But in the interim, what is your message to people who are dealing with these problems right now, victims of repeat break-ins, business owners, small mom and pop shops struggling to stay open because the cost of doing business is simply too high now. And crime is a big part of that.
You know, it's sad to say, but just try not to make yourself a victim. You know, I've been thinking about this a lot because I am hopeful, and it is going to take time. I'm in the middle of it, and I see what's happening, and I know that we're headed in the right direction, but it's going to take time. You know, I just, you know, I don't know what to tell the people that are going to be broken into over and over and over. You know, like I can say, like, you know, maybe car break-ins, don't leave anything in your car. And, but Mary, I just think there's not a whole lot to tell them.
Yeah.
And to add to that is that your vote matters. We know,
Yes.
we know how a lot of it we got into this, and our votes coming up is going to be instrumental in helping ourselves out of this as well.
Well, and I'll say there's a number of things that I think people could do. Number one, call 911, even if you know, just to get the data in the system. It's not necessarily that I mean, that goes to fire and emergency services. And so call 911, no question about that. Police are saying that when people ask, like Victoria said, you know, people need to practice their own personal safety, learn crime prevention through environmental design. And then, you know, third, get involved. I mean, research has historically shown that the more people know their neighbors and the more they engage in informal social control, in other words, get involved in block watch, talk to police, get involved in the advisory council like Victoria leads, come to our community police dialogues. Sergeant Campbell, who runs the Before the Badge training, has said one recruit at a time. It's going to take one recruit at a time to create this change. And it's also going to take one community member at a time, because police can't do it alone. We've worked really hard to our research team to try to get the word out on our Before the Badge dialogues and our micro community policing dialogues. This is an opportunity for community members to connect directly with police. Police are offering to meet people for coffee and directly responding to the things that they're asking for. This is an opportunity for community to be involved and get involved.
And you can also, if for whatever reason, you can download a P3 Tips app, and you can report it to us, and we'll get that right down to the detective investigating that whatever incident that's out there that you're worried about, or if you're a victim of, or have seen, and for some reason are afraid to report because of fear of retribution from a criminal or whatever that might be. Is our business sadly is flourishing right now because of what's been going on.
There's a sense of exasperation from people that we interview when we cover crime, and a lot of them say that they simply don't call because what's the point? You're saying that that's wrong. You're saying that the data collected matters and resources are allocated based on that data. Can you expand on that?
Let me jump in real quick on that one. Oh, sorry.
You know, even, you know, I'm also a community member, and, you know, some people probably will say I shouldn't say this, but, you know, even they're not going to respond. I mean, there are times they're not going to respond, and and I've waited. I mean, the past couple years, and like I said, I'm not criticizing them at all. I criticize city council, but yeah, I mean, it is going to show the numbers, you know, of where it's happening and who's calling, but it still doesn't solve your problem right then. It's not solving the problem. I mean, you're collecting data, but that's it.
For the business owner who has a break-in, or for the person who sees a crime right in front of them, if you're not sure what to do, contact the prosecutor's office. We can help you out. It can be difficult sometimes. An officer writes the first appearance arrest report, and then there's a question of if it goes to a detective, if there's one available, or where it is in the process, or sometimes it gets referred to us and we need more information, because the difficulty is to prove something under the law is much harder than it is on Facebook. And sometimes it's common sense where it's like, this obviously is a crime, but under the law, it can be much more difficult. But if you're that business owner, and I hear you, it feels like a chore and it's not fair. But if you have that video, if you have that witness statement, if you have somebody who can contact someone, don't assume people have it. And if you're not sure who to contact, reach out to the prosecutor's office. We can help put you in touch with the officer who is assigned to it. And if there isn't a person, that sergeant that might handle that individual unit, whether it's in Seattle or anywhere in King County. And when it comes to change, I think the more people hear from survivors and understand their stories of what it's like to be in a neighborhood and hear gunshots and not call and feel frustrated and feel helpless and be the business owner who wants to leave, the more people hear those individual stories, that I think will move people as much or more than data does, to say, okay, we need to work together to find the solution here.
Has the nature of crime changed, to your knowledge, in the last 2 years? Previously, we might see simple crimes of opportunity, for an example, purse left out in the car. Now we're seeing more organized retail theft. We're seeing large groups of criminals. Can you talk about the need right now to focus on organized crime and how big of an impact it's having?
In terms of organized retail theft, just through November, the number of cases that King County, the number of charges of organized retail theft just through November that the King County Prosecutor's Office has filed is already double what it was in all of last year. And that number will go up because of the extra month that's still left. We've also seen an increase in violent crime. If you look at 2018, there's many more shootings, many more call outs. And that's not unique to Seattle or King County. That's happening in major cities across the nation. We've also seen domestic violence. We've had more domestic violence related death in this year than we have in any other year of recorded history in King County. Again, that's not unique to our neighborhood or our city or county, but that shows both the importance of properly funding the right kind of officers and thoughtful people who can address it together, and also the severity and the stress on the system, because at the same time, you're still getting property crimes, you're still having car break-ins, but the influx of violent crime is taking so many more resources at every part, police, jail guards, prosecutors, all across the board.
Well, Mayor Harrell and Chief Diaz, they have a goal of filling 120 vacancies next year with new hires. Jim, you mentioned the time it takes to train new recruits. When you factor that in, it looks like it will likely be 2 to 3 years before we see new boots on the ground, so to speak.
Well, it depends. Those are new recruits. If they get some from other agencies, laterals, that's greatly reduced. So hopefully we get some more already trained, just to learn the way things are done in our area. Go through Victoria and Jacqueline's pre-hire screening, and we can get these people on the street sooner than that.
We're about to run out of time at 44 minutes. Before we go, any parting words from our panel here?
Well, I want to say to the community, if they want their you know, crime to go down and this problem to be solved, they got to get out and vote. I mean, that's going to make a huge difference. If we already have a mayor that is supporting SPD. If we had a better city council, I think that would even help change. You know, I think it would bring officers here. You know, I've talked with officers that are disappointed that we still have these city council members, but the other main thing is just to hold tight and I mean, we are moving there and it's slow. It's going to be slow, but we are heading in the right direction.
Thanks to KOMO for covering this. This is a hard topic to cover. And if people watching this, you know, feel pessimistic or frustrated with the prosecutor's office or want to know where a case is, call me or call us anytime. If you have a person's name or an incident number for anywhere in King County, rather than feeling like, oh, this isn't going to work, contact us. We'll walk you through where that case is and exactly what we're doing about it. And the more we have those relationships with folks, I think the more they'll see the work that we do and hopefully be reassured about the teamwork that's happening.
And to our police departments, we love you. Keep up the good work, and we're behind you 100%.
And please come to one of the community police dialogues. You can get a hold of me at Seattle University. Go to the SPD MCPP website. Go to publicsafetysurvey.org and sign up. If you want to have hope, come meet the Before the Badge recruits.
Well, Victoria, Jim, Casey, Jacqueline, thank you so much for your time. This is a very heady topic. Quite frankly, we could have spent another 2 hours talking about it and analyzing it. But it really is reassuring to end on a positive note with some focus on solutions and not just the ongoing problems. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for taking part in this town hall. Thank you, guys.